Well, hello. Thanks for joining me. I am Chris. I'm the pastor at Compass. I am really glad that you're with me today. Now, let me tell you a story of a man who wanted to surprise his wife by doing something nice for her. They were dirt poor at the time. They really couldn't afford anything. So they couldn't afford to go out, have any fun. But he thought it would be nice to bring her home something to eat. Just a tasty little treat. So he drove to McDonald's. He bought her a surprise double cheeseburger and he brought it home to her. And there you go. The story of a great husband who did something extremely thoughtful because he loved his wife. Now, let me tell you another story. There was a woman who hated mustard. She hated it so much, she couldn't even stand the smell. And one afternoon, her husband came home with a bag from McDonald's. And she was super excited. She loved McDonald's. But when she opened up the burger, it was covered in mustard. Her husband had forgotten to ask them to leave it off. Her feelings were so hurt because he hadn't remembered something that was so obvious about what she liked and didn't. Like he didn't even care. At least though she was going to have some French fries, which honestly were her favorite thing from McDonald's anyway. But there weren't any fries in the bag either. She asked her husband where they were, and he said that he only got her the cheeseburger. So she cried, because her husband was so insensitive and cared so little that he didn't get her fries and he didn't think to ask for no mustard on her cheeseburger. And there you go. The story of a terrible husband who was so thoughtless that he didn't care to remember what his wife liked and didn't like. Now, you may have already figured this out, but these are the same story. If you just heard the first version, it's the story of a wonderful husband who's treating his wife to something wonderful. But when you understand what she liked and didn't like, it gives the story a whole different context. And now it's the story of a complete idiot who hurt his wife's feelings. And yes, I was the husband in that story who made his wife cry over a mustard-covered double cheeseburger. I confess. The only good thing that came out of this whole story is that I got to eat 2 cheeseburgers instead of 1, so I guess I kind of won. But sometimes a story takes on an entirely different feel when you know things that are happening in the background, or you know things that have happened in the past. And walking through the Gospel of Matthew, we find ourselves at one of these big stories. It's the story of the Last Supper. But we're going to skip over that story, and we're going to come back to it later, because to really feel that story, we need to understand something that was on the mind of Jesus and on the mind of his disciples through that entire meal. And here it is, Matthew 26:21. While they were eating, he, Jesus, he said, "I tell you the truth, one of you will betray me." Now, this isn't terribly surprising to us because we know Jesus' story and we know that Judas was going to betray him. But the disciples didn't know that. And there's another little detail that we don't think of very often when we think about the Last Supper, and it's found in something else Jesus said at the table. Check this out in John 16:31 through 33. "But the time is coming, indeed, it's here now, when you will be scattered, each one going his own way, leaving me alone." You may not have ever seen this before, but Jesus didn't just say that Judas would betray him. He said all of them would. Every single one of the disciples would be scattered, leaving Jesus all alone. The thing simmering in the background of the Last Supper and everything that comes after would be the fact that according to Jesus, all of them would abandon him. Now, we're going to come back to the story of the Last Supper next week, but when we do, I want us to fully grasp and understand the betrayal that's weighing on Jesus as they share this meal. And to do that, we're going to look at what happened right after the meal. So we're going to go to Matthew 26:31 through 32. It says, "On the way, Jesus told them, 'Tonight all of you will desert me. For the scriptures say God will strike the shepherd and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I've been raised from the dead, I will go ahead of you to Galilee and meet you there.'" After the Passover meal, where Jesus had predicted their coming betrayal, he added another detail. He says this, "It's going to happen tonight." The disciples understandably had a strong reaction to this. Look at verse 33. Peter declared, "Even if everyone else deserts you, I will never desert you." Jesus replied, "I tell you the truth, Peter. This very night before the rooster crows, you will deny three times that you even know me." "No," Peter insisted, "even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you." And get this, and all the other disciples vowed to do the same. Peter can't even contemplate the idea that he would deny Jesus, and neither can any of the other disciples. And each of them, in turn, commit that they would never desert Jesus. They'd die first. That Jesus, you are mistaken. None of them would ever betray him. And yet, look what happens in Mark 14:50. Then all his disciples deserted him and ran away. By the end of that night, all of them deserted Jesus. You could say that all of them betrayed him. Jesus' best friends, who he literally shared every part of his life with for the last 3 years, abandoned and betrayed him. This coming betrayal is the backdrop of the Last Supper. Jesus knowing that each of them would desert him, and then the disciples, shaken by what must have felt like an accusation, refusing to believe it. And that's where we're going to stop our story this week, with the overwhelming weight of the disciples' abandonment. But while we're going to pause the narrative today, I still want to talk about what's at the heart of it all, because it's something that many of us have experienced: betrayal. Betrayal is something that happens in so many different ways. It could be an unfaithful spouse, a disloyal friend, or a leader who violates our trust. It can be as big as a parent choosing politics over their children, or as small as a husband forgetting to get a cheeseburger without mustard. However it's played out in your life, the sting of betrayal and abandonment, it's something that we've all felt. It is an all too common human experience. It's certainly something that Jesus felt. And we can even find people wrestling with it in very direct language in the Bible, in the Psalms. Look at Psalm 41, 5-9. "But my enemies say nothing but evil about me. How soon will he die and be forgotten?" they ask. "They visit as if they were my friends, but all the while they gather gossip. And when they leave, they spread it everywhere. All who hate me whisper about me, imagining the worst. Even my best friend, the one I trusted completely, the one who shared my food, has turned against me." I think that the worst betrayal, it comes from the people who we're closest to. And here the writer of Psalm 41, he describes how his best friend, the one he invited into his home, shared meals with, he trusted completely, that friend turned against him, spreading gossip about him, believing the worst of him, wanting the worst for him. Have you ever experienced that? Someone who was so close to you, who you shared your life with, who turned their back on you. They talked about you in the worst ways to others. Somehow they forgot who you really are, and they started thinking the worst of you, the worst of your motivations, your beliefs, and your actions. And it leaves us asking, how could they have turned on me so quickly? How could they possibly believe these horrible things about me when they know me better than that? I think it's interesting that this is the psalm Jesus was thinking of when he reflected on his own betrayal. John 13:18. Jesus said, "But this fulfills the scripture that says, 'The one who eats my food has turned against me.'" But this psalm, it isn't the only reflection on betrayal in the Psalms. Look at Psalm 55, verse 12-14. "It's not an enemy who taunts me. I could bear that. It's not my foes who so arrogantly insult me. I could have hidden from them. Instead, it's you, my equal, my companion and close friend. What good fellowship we once enjoyed as we walked together to the house of God." And here we see it again. This psalmist is betrayed by someone close, but this time, it's more than just a friend. This time it was someone who walked with them in the house of God. They were betrayed by someone in their shared religious community, by another follower of God. This one is so hard for me to understand, because as followers of Jesus, one of our core commitments to God is that we will love our neighbor as ourselves. The church community is to be one of absolute and unconditional love. Jesus literally said the world will know that we are his followers by how well we love each other. But betrayal is the opposite of love. The rejection and abandonment of someone you're close to, particularly someone in your religious community, is an absolute denial of the way of Jesus. And yet it happened here, and it still happens today. More on that in a second, but the writer of Psalm 55 continues in verse 20 through 21. It says, "As for my companion, he betrayed his friends. He broke his promises. His words are as smooth as butter, but in his heart is war. His words are as soothing as lotion, but underneath are daggers." Have you ever had someone break up with you and then they'll say something like, I just think this is best for both of us. Or, you deserve someone better who can actually give you what you need because I just can't. Or maybe you're the one who said that when you broke up with somebody else. Those words, they're so smooth and eloquent, but they still feel like getting punched in the stomach. Pretty words don't stop something from hurting. And however you slice it, betrayal hurts bad. And when you're the one doing the betraying, it doesn't matter how well you can justify it or how amicable and reasonable you might appear or how smoothly you can rationalize it to others. It still cuts like daggers. I think that we fully established that being betrayed and abandoned is extremely painful. We don't really need the Bible to prove that. When they tell us about their experience, the writers of the Psalms, they aren't really telling us anything we don't already know. But there is something they said that we need to look at. See, the guy who wrote Psalm 55, he told us all about how painful it was when his close church friend betrayed him. He said it felt like being stabbed by daggers. He was confused and hurting. He poured out all of his pain on the page. And after he'd written it all down, he wrote something else. He wrote this in Psalm 55, 16 and 22. It says, "But I will call on God, and the Lord will rescue me. Give your burdens to the Lord, and he will take care of you." He says, I've been betrayed and broken by someone close to me. I'm hurting and defeated, but I will call on God. I will give this burden and this hurt to him, and he will take care of me. Look at what the writer of Psalm 41 said after he poured out his heart over his betrayal. Psalm 41:10, he wrote, "Lord, have mercy on me," sitting in the pain and the hurt of abandonment. The writer of Psalm 41, he looks up to God and calls out, "Lord, have mercy on me." Do you want to know what you can do when you've been crushed and broken by betrayal? Call on God. I know this isn't profound and theologically dense, but many of the most important things in a life of faith are simple and straightforward. And when your heart has been devastated by someone else, there is a simple takeaway that I have for you, and it's this: give your burdens to the Lord, and he will take care of you. This is Psalm 55:22. I didn't even need to rephrase it because it was already put so well. Give your burdens to the Lord, and he will take care of you. Jesus did it. In fact, this whole conversation about the denial of Peter and the other disciples, it all happened while they were on their way to the Garden of Gethsemane, where, you guessed it, Jesus called on God, where Jesus cast his burdens on God, where he asked God to have mercy on him. We have been hurt so bad in the past by people who felt like they were betraying us. And we can relate to the guy who walked into the house of God with his betrayer, because all of our deepest hurts have come from other Christians and people in the church. Every single one of them. And maybe that's your experience too. Maybe the fact that it was Christians who abandoned and betrayed you makes it hard for you to bring your pain to God, because it was his people who caused that pain. But all of the people who betrayed Jesus were God's people too. But God isn't the cause of your hurt. He's the solution. And just because someone's words were churchy and smooth doesn't mean they came from him. And just because your pain came from people who claimed him doesn't mean it was from him. Your experience may be totally different than mine. Maybe yours was a divorce, or when a dear friend cut you off over a misunderstanding or disagreement, or when a difference of opinion or belief caused someone to label you unfairly and then treat you as an other rather than as the friend or family member that you were. The ways in which we can be hurt and betrayed by others are as numerous and different as snowflakes. But the way in which we find healing for all of those betrayals is simple. Give your burdens to the Lord and let him take care of you. He is there with mercy for those who ask him for it. So today, begin bringing your deepest hurts to God. Tell him what happened. Tell him how you really feel. You don't need to sugarcoat it. The writers of the Psalms sure didn't. They brought their hurt to God raw and even angry. And if you don't know how to bring your hurt to God, look to those Psalms as an example. Read and pray Psalm 41 all the way through Psalm 55 because they are prayers of confusion and pain from people who are casting their burdens on God. Let the Psalms be a roadmap and a guide for you as you call on God. And as you do, may your burdens become light. May your grief become joy. May your anger turn into love. God sees you. He cares about you. And he knows your pain because Jesus walked the same path. And you can know this as we wrap up today. You are not alone. As you cast your burdens on God, my prayer is that you would find joy and light and life in him. And I pray that God would transform your life completely as you follow him step by step. I'll see you next time.